Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to take this time because I understand some things that I deem very precious that our guests are coming with. And I want to stop right here and say thank you for coming and spending time, the precious, precious commodity of time. Many of us misuse, do not understand the value of our 24 hours. And we misuse it, and it says much about who we are. But once one is awakened, time becomes one's friend. The other is that journey. The journey housed who we were and made us into this beautiful creature that we are. And we have a couple of gorgeous ones in front of us. We have Joe and we have Doug. And I cannot wait for them to engage with us. And so I want to extend my heart's welcome to you both. Thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. It is an honor. One of our customs here, guys, is for you to tell the folks, tell them that we are all servants, those that are awakened. Tell whoever wants to go first to tell the folks, how do you serve mankind? How do you find yourself humbled as you are engaging with another being?
Question. And the way that I'm in service is through my work in the addiction realm. So being able to work with people who are struggling with any kind of addiction, whether it's substances, relationships, food, eating, not eating, shopping, anything that we do that takes us out of ourselves, that has a negative consequence. I have been through that myself and can really meet people in that depth of pain and fear when something has gotten bigger than themselves. And it's always an honor to meet people in that place of vulnerability and opportunity, because that really is the greatest gift, is getting clear, getting sober, overcoming, taking our power back.
That's beautiful. I am of service in my life through my gift of creating beautiful jewelry art. I have a business here in town, and that's what I do full time. I feel so fortunate with that. And it's not just creating jewelry to sell it to make money, not at all. Every piece, I focus on the custom jewelry, custom commission jobs, because it's such an energetic exchange between me and that customer, me and that piece of jewelry, and creating what they need, that want, that perfect symbol for whatever it is to mean and represent in their life. And I feel I do have a special gift with that. And then just the beauty and the peace and joy it brings into that person's life. And sometimes it's a keepsake for someone who has passed. Sometimes it's to represent a wedding. That's one of my gifts of service. And woven into that is, wow, sharing stories of a life of trauma and overcoming traumas. And one of such was overcoming addiction, substance abuse. 25 years of that, and overcoming that nearly a decade ago. And what I've been offered to just share and to connect with people in their path to living, whether it's a sober, substance-free life or just transitioning into a life of recovery, whatever it is, whatever trauma it is we're recovering from, and how to first reconnect with ourselves so then we can connect with others. So those are my gifts of service. And fortunately, we've been able to not only come together in a partnership, but a union of creating a vessel, a container to serve and help others through that process of overcoming substance abuse into a life of thriving and recovery.
Yeah, this is one of the things that really fascinated me about you guys, is the synergy, that how you work. And so I'm curious as to how that came about. But one of our customs, guys, is to go back. We like to go back in that location that we call family. From time to time, I tell people it's the lab where we have scientists. We call those scientists parents. And these parents are about to experiment on you and I with whatever trauma they have. They're going to begin to input data into you and I. And that data, that information, in some cases can be traumatic, and it does govern our life. Doug, introduce us to your space. What did that look like as this young man, mom and dad kissed him, brought him into the house, tossed him into the cage, I call it the cage, the beautiful cage that we call the crib, and we start the restrictions right there. What was your family unit like?
Whoa, great question. And what you just said, we start the restrictions right there. Wow, you nailed it. What was my family unit like? From my experiences so far on this planet and what I observed of other family units, mine was very untypical. At least for me, it was. Going back, truthfully, it began with my biological mother being raped by multiple men.
Wow.
During that heinous incident, she conceived child, me. I'm the byproduct of that. Obviously decided to carry out the pregnancy. I was born straight to adoption, and I spent, I don't know how long, but I think it was a couple to 2, 3, 4 months in an orphanage as an infant. And then until the adoption was set up with my parents. They adopted me. They already had a biological son, 4 years older than me. And textbook, it was the perfect home of the father was a surgeon and the mother was college graduate, master's degree in interior design. And it was they lived in a prestigious and beautiful part of town. And everything, there's plenty of money, there's protection, right? There's food on the table, there's a house overhead, a roof overhead. So when I was adopted, and you, like you mentioned, Ken, in your story, they brought me home, or I was delivered by Child Protective Services to their home, and they brought me into this home, and literally the next day they went on vacation and left me and my brand new brother of a half a day with a babysitter for 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
That's a perfect little snapshot of my home life and family life growing up. Welcome to this beautiful structure, but there's not a lot of emotional, physical, anything connect on the inside. And that's been a challenge for me my entire life, was that longing for connection, right? As us as humans, our souls long, we desire that, we need that love, that acceptance, and just woven with the cords of abandonment and disconnect.
Yeah.
So that's been a real challenge of mine, and learning, even, day to day, still remembering that I am love, and how I developed that over these years. And I get to be loved and loved in return. And but that's my picture growing up. And I like how you mentioned it. We're put into this box of family, and say it's this square box, and these are the norms, and these are the rules, and this is how we as parents do things.
Mm-hmm.
And children, you're either going to follow those rules or not. So their biological son, my brother, he jumped right in, said, okay, I will follow your norms. I want to be accepted by you, right? Nature versus nurture. Well, my nature did not connect with their nurture at all. So those square walls of the house rules and norms per se, they never worked and still don't work for me. And that was a hard one to overcome, because wow, the sun just hit us weird, huh? Because I was shunned for not following rules. However, they weren't me at all. They weren't my norm. It wasn't my nature. It wasn't my genetic disposition to jump to that world. So, woo, talk about challenges, talk about finding self, talk about.
And you were conceived through trauma, and as you're telling your story, you could see and listen as you are listening to you and hearing you, that thread that one has and that need, you can see it becoming developed right away, and the impact for that need. And Joe, your beautiful family, your mom and dad kissed you, brought you into a place, I'm sure, in it, with the normal family, the girls is pink and the boys, the blues. You know how it is, what they
Yeah.
call normal. And we see that um, Doug had his first introduction into normal, and he couldn't fit into normal. So, how was your family unit like?
Well, mine was pretty stable and connected and attuned until my mom's addiction to alcohol got really bad. So it was confusing when I was around 6 or 7, like when my
Mm-hmm.
mom got so sick and I didn't understand what happened. I didn't know why. I felt like she hated me all of a sudden. It was just such a shift in dynamics and norms. So I'm fortunate I had, I believe, those real critical early years of safety, love, and connection. But then
Yeah.
the rug got pulled out underneath me, and it really, God, it was so challenging. And my dad was a pilot, and so he was gone all the time. And so I was an only child with a mom who was a raging alcoholic. And it was interesting because inside the home, it was chaotic and confusing. But like, again, on the outside, just like Doug's, it was this prestigious family and, you know, wealth and affluence. And, it had all checked all the boxes, but inside it was really confusing and it was a mess. And the thing that stood out to me was there was very high expectations on me my whole life. Like if I got a B in like third grade, I'd be grounded for months.
Wow.
Um, so as my mom got out of control, her control towards me really intensified, and I had these unrealistic expectations and standards. Meanwhile, none of the adults were meeting them. And I mean, even at a young age, I knew that. So I played the game until about 13 and then was just like, I'm done, and really I got into drugs. I stole a car when I was 15 and I drove 4 states away, called my parents and said, "You're going to send me away to boarding school or I'm driving down to Tijuana and you'll never see me again." I'm 15 years old. And I was like, "You need to get me out of the house." And to their credit, they did. So I spent the rest of my high school years in a boarding school in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was phenomenal. I graduated top of my class. I went on with my life. But so my early years were really, really challenging. I do want to say though, my mom got sober. And so it's always a little weird to talk about the way it used to be. Because thankfully our relationship is so beautiful now. It's respectful, it's honoring, we really enjoy one another. But yeah, growing up, it was hell. It was, I mean, multiple suicide attempts as a young girl. Yeah, it was not good.
and having that type of mentality, having a drastic change with mom, and seeing that and not dad not being there, and you basically bringing yourself up as you stated, and you had a chance to experience all of these things, and you began to um, act different from normal. I have to go back to this thing because this is how society refers to you. And you began to seek your freedom, and you're moving forward in your life, and you went through school and all those things. What happened in your mind, Joe, as far as you, when you were going through all of that? How did it affect you? Even though you went through all of that trauma, how did you come out or how did you manage it?
Well, I love that question. I mean, initially, the way I managed it is I became my mother. It's like that mentality: if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
Um, I, I started drinking at age 11, and I was a full blown alcoholic by 13.
Mhm.
So I just medicated myself to cope. Just sex, substances. I just really kept myself distracted again, looking for that connection.
Hmm.
I think one of the things people miss a lot when they think about addiction is they think of the numbing. But for me, there was also this craving of heightened experiences because I was looking for love. I was looking for
Yeah.
that feeling of love and satisfaction and fullness within myself. But the way that I handled it is I became that which I hated, and I just tried to find myself in different relationships and heightened experiences, and I did numb the pain. And I'm very, very fortunate that I wasn't trafficked or, I mean, I was in really bad situations. So what's interesting though is I always had this sense somewhere behind myself of like, this is temporary and you're going to make it out. And I didn't know how long it was going to take or what door was going to open for me, but I had some sense that I would make it through. And it's interesting. I can't explain it, but I really attribute that knowing to keeping me safe, at least safe enough to finally get better. But yeah, I became that and that's how I coped.
Yeah, I think I believe that man is a being that meditates, period. What we choose to meditate is up to us, and that will decide whether we are going to be a creator in our meditation or are we going to continue to be a slave to that program. So here you are, Doug. You got into the family. Mom and dad brought you in. Your brother, he is 100% bought into the program. You got this little rebellious streak there. How did you now? You have your brother, these two characters, and you are a little different than he is. How did you manage you, Doug, as you are thrust into this situation with mom and dad all over and your brother conforming, and you are not settled, if you will, within that situation?
Mm. It was tricky managing myself. I learned how to entertain myself. I learned that that's what I had to do to self-soothe in all the ways. And because there was no even physical touch. So fast forward as an adult, even just a handful of years ago, I set up an appointment to have a conversation with Dick and Julie, my parents. And I asked them that. I said, I don't ever remember being held as a child. And they said, we didn't hold you. You cried and screamed. You didn't want to be held. And I responded, did you? I said, perhaps that's what I was screaming for,
Huh.
that someone hold me, someone connect with me. But they never did. I didn't sit on anyone's laps and have stories read
Yeah.
to me. No one watched a TV show with me or played with my toys. So that's what I did on my own. And that was a positive, and that was quiet and calming. I would create, right? I'd create with
Yeah.
blocks and cars, and then eventually crayons and pictures, right? Still doing that. And yep. And but when I didn't get the attention, when I'd ask for it or invite people in with the nice words to join me, then I learned quickly if I pushed buttons and played the role of the antagonist, someone would respond. And so often that would be the brother 4.5 years older than me we'd engage in a fight, and even that negative
Yeah.
attention was attention. And so that continued throughout my upbringing too. And so that's when, I was accused of being such an angry child. And so, of course, that came out. Of course, I
Yeah.
was angry. Of course, I was misplaced. I've just always felt misplaced. So a lot of self entertainment.
That's artist. That's where the artist starts. I have a friend of mine that also is a jewelry creator, and I need to talk to you after we're finished. Um, and here you are. You are the antagonist, if you will, and you're moving through life, and you're looking at heading into. You're coming into your high school years, and you're looking into the future. You're looking in college or not. Doug, which road did you pick, and why did you choose the road that you picked?
Good question. Let me make sure I heard you. Did I hear you mention college as well?
Yeah,
Be I
whether you went to college or not, which
Yeah.
road did you pick?
Ooh, great question. Both. I One of my escapes, if I will use that term as a child, was athletics.
Yeah,
I learned when I was a very active kid, it was very normal for me to participate playing football, the real football. In America, we call it soccer, right?
yeah,
Playing soccer, playing football. I played some tennis. I was fortunate enough to grow up near the mountains, snow mountains, and skiing and snowboarding a huge part of my life. So upon graduating high school, I had qualified for the U.S. Pro Tour in snowboarding, and soon thereafter qualified for World Cup events, etc.
mhm,
So of course, I wanted to pursue that professional occupation, and I did. And it took me to another city in the States, a mountain resort town, was the center for U.S. skiing and snowboard teams, where I worked and trained and competed and eventually coached. And so I did go to a college nearby for my bachelor's degree at the University of Utah. And but it wasn't traditional route. It took
yeah,
me 7.5, almost 8 years to get that typical 4-year degree. So I did get that eventually, always with the pressure from my parents of you need to focus on that because that's the sure thing, and you will have a job with that. And I said, but I'm 19 or I'm 20 or I'm 22,
yeah,
and I do have a job. I'm being paid to ride my snowboard, and I'm knocking out education in the off seasons. So
yeah.
that's what I did for a decade. And then into my 30s, a couple different master's degrees in education and counseling, therapy, marriage, family therapy, and all that over the years, always interwoven with the snowboard and athletic careers. It was fun. And picked up jewelry along the way as well, obviously. So
Yeah.
that was my very untraditional routes for me for college. However, the education was still important to me to gain. I just
Mhm.
didn't feel the traditional timeline was important. I don't believe in too many timelines at all, quite frankly. So that was
It-
my path with education.
well, and I tell people, there's many different paths. Find which one is right for you. Don't
Yep.
listen to all these people. There are many to get to how and I tell them. I remember my son's when he wanted to do pharmacy and stuff like that, and I said to him, "Some people go through the front door, some people go through the back door. Find a
Mm-hmm.
door and just get in there."
Ooh, I like
And
that.
so he would always laugh at me, but I told him, I said, there are many ways. There's the windows all over. Get your foot in, and you'll be able to find your way once you're in that house. So I told him there are many ways to life and find your path. I never told my sons that you ought to do this, you ought to do that. I would give them the data. I would say to them, I'm ahead of you because I'm a gentleman and a man, and I'm slightly ahead of you. And from all the other men that I've talked to on this path, when a situation like this comes, this is the data. And I would give it to them, and I said, well, choose wisely. And I would tell them, this is your path. I am your best, um, uh, um, cheerleader. I am here. Whatever you pick, it is you. It will help you to be you. I would tell them, my goal is always this, that you do not need to be in that situation a second longer than you ought to be. But I never wanted them not to have situations because that would make them one dimensional and that would make them ugly in my mind. Joe, how are you? You're there. You're this young woman. You have a path that you're hiding within activities to try not to face you. As you're moving through your life, heading into the direction college and non-college and so forth, as you're growing as a young woman, where did you go and why? I know the lifestyle that you're talking about, but if you're heading there, what was the situation that brought you to that versus going to school? What was it? And what was your thought pattern around that time?
Well, it's interesting. I graduated high school at 16, so I was young, and in the midst of all the dysfunction, it was still expected I'd go to college. Like I even had that expectation. I mean,
Yeah.
in my family, and that's just what you did. And I really admire first generation students, students
Mm,
that was never on the table for them. They had no help. It's incredible when people get themselves to school. But for
yeah.
me, it was expected. And it's like, oh my God, it is a miracle. I'm not dead or in prison and I'm going to college, so I can't even explain it. But and I did great. I had a scholarship. Like I've always been really high functioning mess. Like that's the
Yeah.
best way to put it. And so I got into school. I didn't know what I wanted to do at all, but I was interested in psychology, so that was my minor. And then I was modeling a lot, and I got an opportunity to host a show on the local NBC. It was a
Mm,
Sunday morning 9 a.m. TV show, and I featured like all the clothing stores, the day spas. So it was like the best job ever. I got to just go and get pampered, go shopping, and I really fell in love with journalism, and I wanted to be a journalist. That was what I
yeah.
wanted to do. And as the modeling opportunities kept increasing, I was barely making it through school. I went to the University of Nevada, but I was always in LA, always in Miami. The money was so good. It was hard to say
Right.
no. I almost didn't graduate. And at that point, Playboy had offered me some opportunities to work on Playboy TV, and I took it. And at that point, I was, just so addicted to so many different things. There's no way I could have ever had a normal job. I
Yeah.
mean, ever. And so here I was in this industry that not only allowed me to be drunk or high, it was encouraged,
Yeah.
and everybody was. So and again, the money. And that's one thing I think when
Yeah.
you look at women in the adult industry and any level, you just have to understand I could go work my way up the ladder in journalism and start at 20,000 a year in some podunk town trying to make a name for myself, or I can show up in a stretch limo to this house, film, for this scene, and I'm going to walk out of here with 10 G's. And it's like people go, "Oh my God, how could you do that?" And it's like, well, that's how. And I had no other option. So it's like be homeless and destitute or do that. But what I will say about that experience was I remember one day I woke up on my kitchen floor, which is not a comfortable place to sleep. I had no idea what time of day it was. I was supposed to be on a flight to a shoot. I just I had just come out in FHM magazine. I was dating one of the Chargers. Like on paper, my life would look appealing to some. And I was miserable. Like, I hated myself. I hated my life. I was so sick. I wanted to die. And I just thought, oh my God, this is literally it.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better than this for me, the way I am. And I hate myself. And I called my mom and I was like, I need to go to treatment. And did. Like 2 days later, I was in a 90-day program. So it was after that, when I finally cleaned up, that I went back to graduate school. And I decided I was like, well, just be a therapist, And I still had a lot of my own journey to finish before that was possible. But that's how I ended back up in grad school. A lot of it was I didn't know what else to do. I just knew
Yeah.
I had to get out of LA. I had to get out of that life. I knew I would not make it. So went to grad school.
When you got into therapy, um, what did you discover about you?
Such a great question. The first thing I discovered is how much I didn't know myself at all. And that, I think, is one of the real tragedies of addiction. There's a lot of them,
Hmm.
but I had created a life so far from my truth,
Yeah.
and it was difficult to face that and acknowledge that and admit that, but then also to discover, okay, so if I'm not that, who am I?
Yeah.
That is kind of what therapy started, that process for me. And I'm still completing that cycle. But about a year ago, I stopped drinking like 11 years ago, but I've
Hmm.
cut so many corners in my life to avoid that deep knowing of myself through kind of this dysfunctional marriage, or, oh, I'm just taking sleeping pills, or, oh, I'm going to just retire and go live on a beach in Mexico the rest of my life. Just all these ways to escape myself. And this last year has been a year of reckoning for me, of working with somebody who's a phenomenal coach. And it's like
Yeah.
just sitting in my shit for a year. It's the most clear, most present, most embodied I have ever been.
Liberation, girl.
Yeah,
Liberation.
that's
Liberation
it.
comes, I tell people, um, one must visit the place of solitude. It's powerful. That's where you get to know who you are. That's when you get to face you. That's when you begin to reckon with you. Who am I? And as we began to excavate all of the pain and the trauma that has been residing and living with us, investigating, asking, as I said earlier in the onset, becoming that perpetual investigator of one's self. What an honorable position. But one must come in a place of solitude, cannot be distracted by desires, if you will. And when you get into that place, it can be lonely, but it is the most powerful place you will ever be as you allow yourself to see yourself, as you allow yourself to accept yourself, as you allow yourself to love yourself. It is that space right there. And that's all the power resides. Doug, you're an athlete, top of the line guy. I know as an athlete, your mind, you are learning how to use one's mind to push beyond the norm. As you are doing that and experiencing that and watching your life achieve as you're moving through, when there is no crowd, there is no one but you. What was happening to you?
Ooh, great question. When there was no crowd and there was no one, what was happening to me? In my younger years, I felt lonely in those moments. I felt really insecure. And as, even on the surface and even in that realm of athletics, as confident as I was and as trained as I was, not just physically, but mentally, to drop into those places or that race course or whatever it might be and win. As disciplined as I was, emotionally, I was very, very, very immature. And I didn't know how to handle the emotions. I didn't know how to handle the emotions of how I grew up. I wasn't taught tools of communication. I wasn't taught tools of relationship because it wasn't modeled. I watched a mother and a father stay together and married their entire lives. That's wonderful for them. I watched their son fit into that mold, but there wasn't any help for me. Fast forward to 18, my biological mother passed away. And upon her death and deathbed, the middleman who set up that adoption was still in contact with both families. So my biological family contacted that man who let my adoptive parents know my mother was going to pass. And if we wanted to come to the hospital, it happened to be in the town they lived in, and I was in a nearby resort town, that we were invited to come to the hospital. So I went there, and that was a whole experience, right? My biological mother passed away 15 minutes before I arrived. As I knocked on that hospital door, all these people who looked like me just flooded out the door, and grandparents are touching me and holding my hand, and I have uncles, biological uncles. It's like, whoa, finally someone I look like. But my point is staying on that. How was I when I was alone? Like, now add that experience into the mix from 18 on. I spun out. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the resources, how to cope with life. Like, this is huge, huge traumatic events. I wish I got into therapy. I wish I had people that knew how to show up for me and could and did show up to help guide me through. But I was a mess. And that's where substance abuse just really became the norm. I didn't know I was abusing it. It's like Joe's industry, it was the norm to use and abuse drugs. It was encouraged. I was a professional athlete, a professional snowboarder. We were the rebels, the renegades. Let's get high. Let's get drunk. We just snowboarded and competed. We're in magazines, or we all day long. Now we party all night. So that was the perfect escape for me. But emotionally, those quiet moments, I was a mess. I was so disconnected. I was lost. I was scared. I was lonely. It was tough. It was tough to navigate for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personal growth is not for weak people. Period. You can't, because you have to look at you. And when you look at you in your glory, if you will, your mess, the dark times, that's tough. And so you have to have a pretty strong stomach to handle yourself, because you created you. And so here you are, Doug, you are in the darkness. And I grew up in the church, and I remember reading this part of the Bible when there was this darkness on the planet, and then God said, "Let there be light." What was your statement down that you had to make about you to begin to create this new world that you wanted?
What was my statement? Wow, brilliant question. Thank you. I knew from the get-go, the drum I marched to, that beat was my own. And I was okay with that, even from hearing an adoptive family, their norms, societal norms of that family, right? And the religion they raised me in. I still knew I was different from them, and I liked that. So that juxtaposition of that's not okay, but yeah, this is how I'm going to do it. I stuck with that, and I stuck with that, and I stuck with that through the decades. And I had amazing experiences despite, yes, there's substance abuse going on. And I had amazing experiences going on. My 20s were wonderful. And I had a couple children, 2 sons in my 30s. And I get to come from this life of experience and just expose them to it. I've lived an amazing life in sports and art and gained education along the way. It has been a beauty and a moment of enlightenment, and that path thereof was a beautiful process, transitioning from, okay, life is dark and dreary now. I was around 41, 42 years of age. And I had big decisions to make then. The relationship, a marriage I was in at the time. Do I stay? Do I go? I knew, and I was at the depths of my drinking and opiate abuse. And I knew I needed to clear my mind to make proper decisions, meaning I needed to reconnect with me. And I wanted to reconnect with me. I wanted a deeper connection with my sons. I wanted a deeper connection, with Source.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to sober up all on my own accord, detoxed here in my art studio for a few days, walked myself to AA meetings, became accountable, and immediately upon all that began a daily in-depth yoga practice, which truly is what saved my life and helped me transform, helped me find me, so I can then connect and find everyone else.
Mhm. I call it the statement of faith, man. Everyone needs one to get them out of their mess. You got to believe it more than anyone else.
Yeah,
And,
and I did.
and when we make that statement, Doug, I believe that all the corresponding actions, it falls on us because we believe in the core of ourselves. As Joe said, she said, I gotta get out of here. And she took the corresponding actions to move through. And that is bringing in additional information because you don't have the answers. And so I need to find the location by which I can gather that. I can go to counseling, I can go to reading books, and I can go to classes, but I'm going to gather some information so that I can get to that place where I want to go. So here, Joe, you're in school, you got your stuff, you're finding your way, if you will. And when you are there, what, as you began to see yourself and see the process as it's beginning to bear fruit, how did you speak to yourself? What was the conversation you were having with Joe when she was walking on the streets by herself, sitting in the car? What was that conversation you were having with yourself?
It was definitely more gentle than it ever had been. But I was working through so much guilt and shame and just disconnection from myself. My inner dialogue was always, even in moments that I look back and I go, wow, I really should have been proud of myself for that. It was still really, I didn't trust myself. I didn't like myself. Even at that time when here I am, I'm in graduate school. It was like just a band-aid on a compound fracture. And
Yeah.
somewhere deep down, I knew it. It was better than where I was for sure. But I was still, my core was self-loathing. My core was, I am bad and there's something wrong. So it wasn't until I finally quit alcohol, which took another decade. I had quit all the drugs, which was, again, so it was baby steps. I was getting to know myself incrementally. My
Yeah.
dialogue was changing incrementally. But there was still a real dissatisfaction and disillusioned with this world. I've always felt it. I can remember being 4 years old and I had a diary. I mean, I was just a weird kid. And I wrote about what is the point. As a
Wow.
four year
A
old,
4-year-old girl?
4 year old, I was at my parents had this rose bush and I was just like writing like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? I literally
Wow.
came into the world like that. And so then go through a lot
Wow.
of experiences I had, I really felt it. I'm like, I just don't understand what any of this is about. And I think that, that's where I did party a lot. I just was looking for, ways to just make sense of it all. And that actually made sense to me. And
Yeah.
so then, I start getting more clear. I'm still drinking, but I'm not using drugs so that I'm more present. And my dialogue was, well, at least you're doing this right. You're checking boxes. Parents are somewhat proud of you. You aren't in jail or porn, and so good for you. Good enough. So that's what it was for a while. Yeah.
Uh, do
I
you,
know, yeah.
Joe, do you remember the day when you fell in love with you?
Oh, I love this. I do. It's interesting, being recovery advocates and specialists. I happen to be a proponent of psychedelic therapy when done in the correct set and setting with intentionality and purpose for
Yeah.
some people. My real moment of awakening was in a ceremony where I truly felt myself reborn, like crossed over into the consciousness soup. I
Mm.
mean, my body, I don't remember it, but was contorting and twisting and kicking and hissing. And it was like all of my self hatred
Yeah.
moved. It had life. It got attention. It got love. It got out. And when I came back into my body, like 45 minutes later, I literally remember like shooting through my own birth canal, which was really powerful. And I just remember in that moment, I was like, I'm free. This is what it feels like. But during that process, I went into the depths of hatred. I met myself fully and completely in that space of hate, of despair, of it's never going to happen to me, of I deserved every bad thing that happened. And I surrendered into it. And I
Hmm.
just allowed every like catastrophic moment. I was there for it, witnessed it, shot out, and it was like there it was. That was my love, and it really required me to surrender to everything I spent my entire life trying to not feel. And so
Always.
yeah, that changed me.
Yeah. That's for a human being. Surrendering is one of the hardest things, but it's probably the last thing we have to do because when we surrender, it's no longer in our ability. And that's the hard part to give up, to surrender control to something greater. But we hold on because we want to fix it. Doug, your North Star, your boys that called you into centering oneself. When you got, if you will, centered, and you looked at Doug and you said, I love you. You made it. What was that like?
Beautiful. Finally, it was there all along.
Yeah.
It was a moment where I finally realized that it is there all along, right? That I don't need these other things or people to fulfill me or completely.
Yeah.
As much as I love and feel fulfilled with her and complete with her as a union, I don't need her to have that feeling within now. So that, and I'm going to come back to you mentioning surrender. But that moment when I finally, aha moment, which was a process through sobriety,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with the yoga practice and getting quiet with self, coming into myself, yoking
Yeah.
body, mind, soul, realizing that I am, right? Soham in Sanskrit. I am complete. I am enough. I am love. That was a beautiful process when coming into that, really realizing and embracing my art, my jewelry. Like, whoa, I'm just a vessel
Yeah.
to create something for them, for something to enlighten their life in my yoga classes and with my sons and eventual partner. Wow, I get to show up as this complete unit, therefore offer this person ready, sure, surrendered, that can show up then for another. And that feeling of I am enough, it's such liberation. You mentioned surrender. I think there's such freedom comes with surrender, right? When we're grasping
Absolutely.
on to stuff, holding on to it. I want this. Once we let
Absolutely.
go,
Yeah.
is when we can actually receive it even more, or we're not confined by those, what was constraining us, we're bound to that, but it's actually binding us.
Mm-hmm.
That's letting it go. I am enough. Bring
The
it, world.
answer, everything is on after we let go, Doug. Everything is, it's been waiting there, guys. I actually believe that it's been waiting there for us to get to the place by which we are ready to let go. But I think it's been waiting there. And it is our reward, I believe. One of the most precious rewards that we will get onto this journey is when we get to that place and we surrender. All that is needed is on beyond that, and we express it different ways. Joe talked about her, but trauma, the release of trauma, is an releasing deep emotions, and we express our emotions crying, laughing, all different. There are hundreds of ways to express oneself, but we must move it out. And I believe that surrendering is the key by which we move it out. Another thing that you talked about, Doug, is meditation and all of these different tools, counseling. These are tools by which we bring into our space to move us out, move it out, so that we can create this new path that we are now embarking on. And I tell people that the default thinkers are not creators, they're reactionary living. We get hit, boom, we react. But when one become a designer now through your meditation and the process of managing the thoughts and choosing the thought that you will now give birth to, that is a designer. That is an artist like you do. That is when we choose, as Joe chooses now. When thoughts comes to us, we are no longer a slave to it and a reactionary. We decide, we are the arbiter of it. I will agree with that. No, I will not. And we choose. And based on our choice, we create where we want to go and how we want to go. But this life is a continual thing. We are here for a period. Some of us are lucky and we are here for 80, 90 years, but it's a brief moment. But I know that this journey will continue even into the next space that we move from this, because all this is just a shedding of the body. And then we will create another dimension as we walk into that one. But I want to talk to you about you guys now. Now that you have gone through all of these things, separately. I love this because one must go through this, especially couples. You have to be individual. You have to go through your stuff individually so that you can become more powerful when you are interdependent. So here you are, you have gone through much and you will continue to go through your journey individually. As an interdependent body, how do you manage each other?
Beautiful.
I heard Joe laughing back there.
Thanks. I'll share. How do we manage each other? Great
Yeah, one
question.
has to allow each other to grow. All those fun things.
So much. There's so many dynamics to that. What allows us to grow? But a beautiful example is this morning,
Yeah.
just moments before we came here, and actually part of it on our way to the studio to meet with you.
Hmm.
Every morning we wake up early and we'll have usually me a little bit before her to start with a cup of coffee and quiet time, meditation time, just quiet and enjoy that. She
Yeah.
wakes up and has the same, and we join together, have a cup of coffee and just quiet, maybe morning talk, check in with each other. And she checked in with me today, and I was a bit more open and raw and vulnerable than I typically am. And I shared just a series, just a stack of stresses and fears and real life situations going on for the last many, many months and some to come, right? And I woke to just the weight of them stacked on me, which is rather untypical, but it just was. So I just embraced it and sat
Yeah.
with it. And I divulged that to her and how she showed up in love, in support, and in understanding, and just holding space in just a container of love was absolutely beautiful. And even at 51 years of age is a brand new experience for me in relationship. And as we were driving here, just we lived very nearby and we drove, and she looks at me and she said, Doug, all of this is okay, and you're not in this alone. We are partners. We support each other, we navigate through, and this too will pass. And to me, it was just a beautiful reminder and reinsurance that, yeah, I did this alone. I'm used to doing these alone. I find my own way. I've been fighting since conception, right? I've been
Yeah.
fighting since birth. I've been figuring this out on my own since day one, literally. And I don't have to do that anymore. So that reminder this morning was so beautiful to me and meaningful to me. So that's one way in how we navigate together. And thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Joe?
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to say we come together as partners. I just didn't even think a relationship was possible where you just give each other the benefit of the doubt. You show up in service. You expect goodness and love from the other person. Not all the time. It's not that he needs to be that all the time, but there's not an animosity or a pushing against or a expectation of conflict.
Yeah.
It's very freeing when it's like, wow, no, we're literally on the same page. We have the same goals. We want to create the same environment within our home, within our lives, and we really enjoy one another doing it. So I think when things arise, we come together as partners, and then when things are good, we celebrate one another, and that is a huge thing. We really we have a lot going on individually as well, and it's like I'm his biggest cheerleader and vice versa. There's not that fear of don't get bigger than me or don't do your work. It's like, no, I want you to get, wherever you're meant to go. Be
Yeah.
big, be small, be whatever you want, and I'm here for it. And there's a lot of freedom, which I have never had. I'm very, very used to very codependent relationships. I recreated the dynamic between me and my mother, which was I was responsible for her feelings. And I don't feel that. I have a partner. He's responsible for himself. I'm responsible for mine. And then we get to meet in this beautiful union of like, of support and love and, you know, real honoring. We don't violate each other's boundaries. We don't disrespect one another ever. And we get to just really show up and do life together. And it's awesome. Yeah, it's great.
That is awesome. Hey, all you couples that are listening to this podcast, the stuff that Joe and Doug just talked about, and encouraging boundaries, freedom. That's in a relationship, guys. And so it is possible. And so I have these two folks that are here that can usher you into the possibility. And if you guys are out there and you're a couple and you want to know how do we get to where they are, I'm going to provide everything for you guys to get to them because you ought to get there. How they spoke about each other, the honor that they gave and offered to each other is what you need. When one honors, and you can hear from the language that they use towards each other, that they are serving each other just as much as they serve others through their coaching gifts. Doug is a jewelry designer. I'm going to give you guys stuff for that. Gentlemen, you got to get your woman some stuff that is special, different, one of a kind. I got somebody over here that can take care of that for you. And for those women that have their boy a little messed up, I got this woman that can help him with his mind as much as Doug can help him with his mind. So I got a couple of folks. I got some power brokers in front of me that are here to serve you in so many different ways. Those of you that have been through some dark times, we've talking to two folks that went through some stuff. And I always tell people, I have to clean it up, guys, because I don't know if kids listen. So I tell people that find someone who's been damaged, someone who's been in pain, someone who has been broken. If you are using a coach that haven't been broken, they cannot help you because they don't know the pitfalls. They don't know those blind spots. But if you take someone that has been broken, and as the Japanese do, where they take gold and precious metal and put it within the cracks. I have two people that have some precious metals within the cracks, and they are special as they come. And I am so honored to have them both to share such valuable stuff with us here, their time and their journey. And I am humbled at hearing both of you and experiencing you for this short moment. And I want to thank you both for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you and this opportunity.
Thank you, guys.